Welcome to ABC Behavior Training's podcast, where our goal is disseminating the science of ABA to everyday behavior analysts. If you are part of our membership group, the Behavior Crew, then you are getting priority access to this episode along with free CEU'S for starter and pro level members. If you're not a member, stop what you're doing right now. Head over to abcbehaviortx.com and sign up by clicking on the tab Join the Crew. There is an option that is 100% free forever that gets you priority access to our podcasts, free resources and editable worksheets, participation in our monthly Q&A meetings, access to our private Facebook group, and more. If you decide to become a paying member, you get all of that, plus assessment and supervision resources, monthly themed therapy materials, and free access to up to 5 CEU'S per month, which are approved under both the BACB and the QABA. So go check it out, and remember, if there's anything you'd like to hear about or any specific resources you're looking for, please reach out to me via the Contact Me page at abcbehaviortx.com. Hey guys, this is Melissa Druskis. I'm a board-certified behavior analyst and the owner of ABC Behavior Training, and I am so excited to bring you our very first podcast episode where we will talk about alternative careers as a BCBA. But before we get into that topic, I do want to talk to you a little bit about the format and access of our podcasts that you're going to be getting regular access to. So if you're listening to this on Spotify or iTunes podcasts or somewhere like that, you're getting the full podcast. You can go to my website and purchase the CEU'S for it if you'd like. But no, you're getting this podcast a little bit behind everyone else that's subscribed through my website. Through abcbehaviortx.com, we have a new membership format, which is through clicking on the button Join the Crew, where you can become a member of the Behavior Crew. And in that membership, every month we're going to be going over a unique topic. And really our podcasts, our CEU'S, a lot of the resources that we're going to be releasing that month are all going to be related to that topic. So this month, the topic that we're focusing on is ABA outside the box. So looking at other ways that we could use our education and our background as behavior analysts in other fields without just staying within the field of working with kids with autism. So that is our focus for this month. So this first episode, we'll be looking at some various careers that you could do as a BCBA. And in our second episode, which will be coming out in about 2 weeks, I was able to sit down and have an interview with Dr. Todd Ward, where we will discuss his path as a BCBA, why he left and let his BCBA expire, and how he is still utilizing behavior analysis, even though he's not a BCBA right now. So these 2 episodes are really going to be focusing around that topic, and then future episodes that will be coming out will again have their own theme. So this is the theme for September 2022. Again, regardless of when you're listening to this, of course, you may be listening to this at a different time. For October, we're going to be focusing on staff training and supervision. For November, we'll be looking at medical necessity. And for December, we'll be focusing on antecedent interventions. So that's the themes we have so far, but of course, if there are any themes that you're interested in hearing about or topics, please reach out to me through my website and let me know. And I am happy to see what people are interested in hearing on and start introducing podcasts and topics related to that. So just know, as we're talking about these topics, again, if you're not listening through my website, then you are still getting the same content, but just a little bit behind those that are subscribed members. And again, as you heard in my intro, you can become a member for completely free. No cost at all. You won't get free CEU'S for that, of course, but if you do want to stay with the monthly topics and get those resources and everything else at the time that everyone else is getting it, then definitely go over to abcbehaviortx.com and check that out. So let's go ahead and jump right into this first topic that we're talking about. And, I want to kind of give a little bit of information on my background as well, aside from the fact that, I'm a BCBA and I own ABC Behavior Training. One of the reasons why I personally got really interested in this field is because of the wide reach our field has. And because I come from a diverse background myself. And just knowing myself, I know that I would not be happy in a career where I did one thing for 50 years. I would definitely get bored of that. So the fact that our field can reach so many different areas was a huge selling point for me when I was first looking at getting my BCBA and doing those additional coursework hours. So my background, really, my bachelor's degree is in speech language pathology and audiology. So I graduated with that, and I worked as an SLP assistant for over 6 years, working with kids in home. And it was, some kids had autism, some kids had, a variety of language delays or disorders, articulation issues. So that was really cool because going in, every client that I saw was very different. And if you're familiar with speech, those sessions are a lot shorter. It was like 30 minutes twice a week. So you were really going back to back to back with a wide range of different people. So I really enjoyed that, and I considered getting my master's degree in it to become a fully licensed, certified speech language pathologist. Because even with that, when you're not working as an assistant, there's more options. You can work in nursing homes. You can work with people that have had traumatic brain injuries or strokes, or just a wider range than just working with kids. But I ended up going back and getting my master's degree in applied cognition and neuroscience, and really, I went in, and I don't know how good of an advice this is for other people, but I was really interested in neuroscience. It was something that was really a passion of mine to learn about. Everything was really new and exciting for me. So I went into that master's degree not necessarily having an end goal for what my career was going to be when I got out of that master's degree. So I kind of just jumped into it just for the passion of learning, really. And it was an amazing experience for me, and it is something that also led me to my work as a BCBA now. So with that degree, there's different specializations that you can do. So I had a dual specialization in cognition, and then my other specialization was in human-computer interactions, which I'm actually going to be talking about through my newsletters in one of our upcoming newsletters this month, going over that topic, because that human-computer interaction, or looking at like user interface design, things like that, that is another realm that I think is really good for BCBAs. But again, I'll talk about that in a upcoming newsletter, so you guys can get some of that information. But I really loved this degree. It was like, the coursework was great. I was able to conduct research with a team that was doing studies on working memory using video games with Dr. Chandra Basak at the Center for Vital Longevity here in Dallas. And really everything was really new, really exciting, and you got to actually see these changes that you were implementing through the research, through the coursework. So from those experiences and many more, looking back now, of course, at the time I wasn't a behavior analyst yet, But I could see the ways that we can utilize behavior analysis almost anywhere. So my path to becoming a BCBA, as I was almost done with my degree in neuroscience, I was still working as an SLP assistant at the time. And one of my clients that I had been trying for a very long time to get him to talk and say any sounds, he had started an ABA program, and like 2 weeks into it, he was naming all the farm animals. I was like, what just happened? Like, how did they do that? So I had to go and shadow his sessions and see what in the world they did that me with a degree in speech couldn't get him to talk. And that was really my introduction into ABA, and I loved it. And it was thankfully before the BACB had changed their requirements to limiting the degrees, which recently, of course, they opened it back up again so you can have any degree. But my degree in neuroscience did count. So then I went and took the coursework from Florida Institute of Technology to get that leveling coursework to be able to sit for the exam, and became a BCBA and started working in the field since then. So, but really, like, looking back in speech, I was using behavior analysis. In my degree in neuroscience, in research, like all of those things, we're utilizing it. And even right now, I'm not currently working in the field as a BCBA right now, but am doing some consulting work and, of course, running ABC behavior training. And really through that, I feel like my main job right now is marketing. And there is so much behaviorally that even goes into that. If I just put products and CEU'S out there and hope that you guys will stumble across them one day, I'm not going to be very successful or be able to reach very many people. I need to think about the behavior and motivations of my audience. So where can I put my messages so that you see them? What should I title my emails so that you are motivated to open them? What images, colors, and fonts provoke certain emotions that will influence you to share an article with your colleagues, or click the sign up button for my newest CEU, or follow me on social media? And this is just me as a BCBA doing this with zero formal education in marketing. So if you really look out there, our skills of analyzing behavior and making environmental changes to alter those behaviors is a pretty powerful tool that can be used in a wide range of industries. So with all that being said, I do also want to kind of come back to what I know most of us, what our main job is, which is working with children or adults with autism. So even though we're exploring this topic of ABA outside the box, it's not to say that we need to get away from working with kids with autism. It is such a needed job, and there are jobs available everywhere for it. It is constantly growing. It's something that I've done for years. I really do enjoy it. And it's very fulfilling and rewarding being able to see those changes in our clients' lives. But I also think it's important that we don't just box ourselves in to this one area when our field can be doing so much more. And also, sometimes we get burnt out of doing the same thing. Or maybe you have found another passion, and that's okay. Like, you can still use your skills and follow these other paths that you want to explore or take. So the purpose of this is really to just broaden your ideas of what you can do while still being a behavior analyst or still using the science that we all have a background in. So again, this whole month of our topic that we're looking at, again, we don't want to stop working with kids with autism. Like, that would be such a tragedy if there was like a decrease in employment in that field. It's just so we know what other options we have, and so we can take this science and utilize it in all these areas that it would honestly be really great for. So with this podcast today, I'm going to be talking about a couple of general areas that we can work in as behavior analysts. And My resources are going to be linked below. But the places I'm getting these from, and again, there's so many different realms and areas that we can work in. But I'm going to be focusing on behavioral pediatrics because I think that that is maybe the one that's kind of closest to what we do now if you are somebody that works with children with autism. And then also looking at sports and fitness because I see that as maybe one of the bigger areas and an area that a lot of people have a pretty big interest in. So the resources for this first one is actually from the BACB website, and I think this is fairly new that they put it on there. If you go to the BACB website, and again I have the link here, but you go up to the top, click on Behavior Analyst, and they have this website that is focused on ABA subspecialty resources, and I would highly recommend checking that out. I'm only going to be talking about a couple of the things that they have in there, but they have just PDF really quick snapshots of different careers. But then they also have some videos which were really helpful. I went through and looked at several of those for this podcast to get additional information. And they're like hour-long videos that talk about different subspecialties that you can work on. So I'm just on the website now looking at some of the different things they have on there. Of course, autism and intellectual developmental disabilities, that's the one we're most familiar with. And then behavioral gerontology, behavioral pediatrics, which is one that we'll be talking about, sports and fitness, brain injury rehabilitation, which that's one that I'm definitely going to go back and look more into because that's an area that I'm interested in, just coming from that background of speech. Prevention or intervention in child maltreatment, clinical behavior analysis, education, health and fitness, which the video for that also lumps in with sports, organizational behavior management, sustainability, treatment of substance use disorders, and public health. So those are just, they have like 9 different videos on here to kind of go over those. And just from me looking at them, they all seem to be about almost an hour long. But that is a lot of information in different subspecialties that you can work on. And each of the videos, they all have article references as well of behavior analysts working in this field, doing research in this field, and how that can be utilized. And then the other resource that I have, which I'll have an Amazon link up there, but you can just Google this as well because I think there were some other sources that you can get this book that was cheaper than Amazon. But this is the application of behavior analysis in healthcare and beyond. So this is a book that is like a compilation kind of articles as well, where each section they are talking about different things that you can do as a behavior analyst. And I'm going to go through this one as well just because it covers so many topics that we might not even be aware of that could be in our realm if we develop some competency in it. Interestingly, this one doesn't really go over the sports, health, and fitness, but that's okay. There's tons of resources that do. So for this book, it has a section for early intervention settings. So of course, working with kids with autism, early intervention for infants at risk of autism, a school psychology, and behavioral parent training. So where you could potentially just focus on the parent training aspect of our job. And then we have clinical settings for intensive behavioral intervention units, competency in the assessment and treatment of pediatric feeding disorders, sustainability of behavior analysis in a pediatric primary care. So that's the behavioral pediatrics that I'll be going over as well. Outpatient interventions in clinical behavior analysis, and opportunities and considerations for ABA in person-centered adult services and residential settings. And then we also have where it goes into specialty populations. So they're looking at here also brain injury, substance abuse, and behavior analysis for couples. So that's also a realm we can look into. And then some non-clinical settings. So behavior analysis in business. So that's going to be kind of focused more on OBM, educational systems administration, behavioral education, and then also companion animal behavior analysis. So just through these two resources that we have, like that is a very full and lengthy list of different areas that we can work in. And that's not even a complete list. Like I've mentioned some other things like user interface design and marketing, and those aren't on those lists. So, anywhere that you look, that you're looking for these alternative careers, I mean, I definitely think that we can find it out there. It's just, what is it going to look like, us moving into this field, and how are you going to do that? Like, what is your method for getting the competency that you need and being able to move into this new field that is not necessarily designed for or even requiring of an actual BCBA, but that your background and education could be really vital. So the first thing that we'll look at is behavioral pediatrics. Before we continue, I want to take a short break here and ask, how many of you love conducting assessments and writing reports? Chances are not that many of you are excited when reassessments come around. They are a vital part of our job, but the interviews, paperwork, and decisions about which assessments to do and what information to include in the report can be overwhelming, especially for new BCBAs, but also for those of us that have been in this field for years. If you want to make your life easier, please go to abcbehaviortx.com, check out our CEU'S under the Products tab, and sign up for the Masterclass Assessment and Report Writing. This 4 CEU course will cover 6 modules, including Assessment Overview, Assessment Protocols, Report Overview, Critical Elements for Reports, Treatment Goal Writing, and What to Do after the report. You will learn how to choose different assessment protocols for your client, how to turn your assessment into a report showing medical necessity, how to write appropriate treatment goals, and tips to defend your treatment recommendations and avoid insurance denials. Don't miss this important topic to ensure your clients continue to get the services they need. And the best thing is that this is pre-recorded and your access never expires. So you can get it now and go back to the information a week from now, a month from now, or even a couple of years from now. Also, be sure to add on the report writing package, which you can do right there in your cart when you check out. This package will add on report templates for initial and reassessments, parent interview templates, 20 program templates from our program library, behavior intervention protocols, FBA templates, assessment scoring calculators, and more. And everything is in an editable format to individualize for your client. So stop stressing when those assessment due dates start popping up and use these tools to become more confident and efficient in your assessment and report writing. Now let's get back to this week's conversation. So the video on the BACB website for behavioral pediatrics is done by Patrick Fryman, and he was my first introduction to behavioral pediatrics and has so many great videos out there and articles, and he's also funny to listen to, so definitely check out that video if that's something that you're interested in, and his other articles that he has. But a lot of this information is coming from that video, and then again the book that I cited earlier. So for behavioral pediatrics, we're just thinking of what does it look like for typical children when they are going into a doctor's appointment, and what sorts of things are they coming in there for? So 20 to 50% of children will experience behavioral problems at some point, but less than 20% actually receive any sort of treatment. And a lot of times this is kids that are exhibiting typical skill deficits or typical behavioral problems, but it's disruptive to the family or their daily life, which leads to parents ineffectively trying to manage the behavior by yelling, punishing, bribing, and more. And then parents will often consult the pediatrician. That's a lot of times the first place to go to, but with short visit times and a focus on medical concerns over behavioral concerns, these issues are often not addressed or they're just dismissed as typical childhood behavior. And some of this might be typical childhood behavior. It does not mean that it's any easier to deal with. I currently have a 3-year-old who's almost going to be 4 in December, and I'm a behavior analyst. And let me tell you, it is not easy, and I know the right things to do and the things not to do. I can only imagine how much harder it is when you don't have that background and you're just trying to make it work and trying to get through the day, all with things that are typical and developmentally appropriate for children of these ages. And then mainstream mental health care could potentially help, but especially for things that are not huge issues, those typical behaviors that we still need to work on, it can be stigmatizing, and there's no standard of care for these issues. So if you have, a kid that's, having toileting issues, and, the pediatrician says, yeah, everything's fine, that's normal, let's wait to deal with it until they're 6 years old or something like that, because it's not necessarily abnormal right now, but that's a year away, and then maybe you go to a mental health care professional, but what that's going to look like and what that treatment is, as long as they are acting ethically, there's really not a standard for how everybody's going to handle this issue. So it's really just luck of the draw as far as who you get that's handling that and what they're going to do to work to solve that problem. So thinking about something like that and thinking of how we as a BCBA might handle those situations, I mean, we have specific evidence-based procedures that we use pretty much across the board, that there may be some variations in, of course, but if you go to one BCBA or 10 BCBAs for handling toileting issues, chances are we're pretty much going to have very similar methods for handling them. And I think that's really important when you have these parents going out to seek help for some of these things. So in the video that Patrick Fryman was doing, he talked about 4 main domains that we could really provide assistance in when we're looking at behavioral pediatrics. So the first domain is routine behavior problems that are presenting in primary care. The second one is behavioral problems with significant medical dimensions. The third domain is medical problems with behavioral dimensions. And then the fourth one is medical compliance. So I'm kind of going to focus a lot more, at least, on that first domain of routine problem behaviors in primary care. I myself, going into a normal checkup, I've had those lists of questions like, she is doing this and this and this. Are these things normal? How do I get her to stop doing these other things if they're not normal? And again, that's me coming from, a background of working with kids with autism and behavioral issues. But some of the more frequent things that they'll see in a primary care setting that parents might come in for is learning deficits and how to address that, uh, excessive crying, feeding issues or picky eating, toileting issues, toddler misbehavior, bedtime issues, problems with siblings and getting along with siblings, um, any sort of defiance behaviors, oppositional behaviors, ADHD diagnoses, school problem behaviors, depression, peer problems, things like that. So, I mean, those are things that parents, they don't know where else to turn. They don't know what specifically to do. Go into their doctor's office, their pediatrician's office, and ask for help. And the help that you can get, it's really going to vary based off of the pediatrician's knowledge in these different areas. And again, if you have something that you feel is pretty minor and you get referred to mental health, well, a lot of families probably might not feel comfortable with that. So if pediatrician's office had in-house somebody that could work with these behavioral problems. And again, it's not going to look like what we do with ABA, where we're doing, you know, 10 or 20 or even 40 hours of therapy a week. This can be handled in much shorter amounts of time because we're looking at much more focused behaviors. But if there was somebody in-house that they could refer to, then that makes it a lot more manageable for parents. And it also is going to make it a lot more manageable for the pediatricians. Imagine if all of those appointments that they got were just referred to somebody else to look at. Now, really important, like anytime that we are looking at these things, especially for this is a new behavior that's popped up, we do always want to rule out any medical concerns or a new medical problem that has come up. And that, again, is why being able to work with a pediatrician in the same office or, work very closely with them can be very, very helpful to help rule that out and then go in the direction of making those behavioral changes and doing recurrent consultations with the parents to work on those. Now, continuing on with the other domains that Dr. Fryman was talking about related to behavioral pediatrics, domain 2 and domain 3, they're a little bit similar in their description, so I'm going to kind of combine them together. But domain 2, he's talking about behavioral problems with significant medical dimensions. And for that, he mentioned encapresis, which is bowel movement accidents after age 4 with no underlying medical conditions. And for domain 3, that is medical problems with behavioral dimensions. So for this one, he's talking about an example of enuresis, which is wetting after age 5, again, not due to a medical condition. And I'm sure there are more examples in each of these different domains, but just for the purpose of both of them, really a lot of them can result in referrals to psychopathology. And the problem with that is that there, especially in his examples, there's a lot of mentalistic explanations for why these things are occurring, because again, there's not an underlying medical condition as to why they're occurring. But in both cases, we have research in our field that they can be handled behaviorally as well and handled successfully behaviorally. And then the fourth domain, he's talking about medical compliance. So this is one of the biggest problems in the field of medicine. And of course, it's not just in pediatrics, but really across the board. So one study that he was talking about was related to non-kept appointments and what sorts of environmental changes can be made there to increase compliance just with attending visits that they should be attending. But this can also go into being compliant with medication regimens or behaviors like glucose testing for diabetes. Now, we have the skills as behavior analysts, we have the skills necessary to provide evidence-based treatments for these issues. But we need a bit more than that to be able to just jump into a pediatrician's office and go to work. So, in the book that I've referenced, they talked about several additional skills that are needed to be successful in this area. So, we need to make sure that we are competent with assessing and treating behaviors and problems that frequently occur in primary care, which is going to be a little bit different than what we would typically see working with kids with autism. So, we have behavioral issues like ADHD, in-home or school-related behavioral problems, feeding issues, weight issues, developmental delays, mood disorders, just to name a few. And we would need to make sure that we receive supervision relevant to these areas and their treatment with evidence-based interventions such as exposure, behavior activation, parent management, and habit reversal. We'd also have to make sure that we would be able to integrate these interventions in the fast-paced setting of primary care using brief treatment formats focused on the most important components. Again, thinking of what our typical day looks like as a BCBA. I mean, some of our sessions, some of our clients get 40 hours a week, so we have a lot of time. But if you compare that to what it looks like in primary care settings, those patients are in and out really quickly, and then on to the next patient. So being able to make sure we could implement this in a quick format, I think would probably be one of the biggest changes that we would have to encounter in this setting. And then, of course, we'd also have to understand how to work within the medical care model because that is going to be different than our typical setting. And then also understanding medical conditions and the medications being provided, including the side effects, so we can understand how that would impact any treatments that we develop. And also really just being able to have that close work with the pediatrician to make sure there is that collaboration there so there's not, an overlap or something being worked on that's actually a medication side effect. Some other potential barriers to overcome is billing for behavioral services. So right now, insurance will only provide payment for ABA services for children with autism, and there is really no way to actually bill for these services in a pediatric primary care setting with our current licensure that we have. And then even if you do have additional credentials, then you have to look at, is there any issues with double billing or, billing for seeing the pediatrician and seeing whatever your credential is on the same day. So billing could definitely be an issue. And again, when you're in a primary care setting like that, it's not necessarily going to be expected that people are going to just pay out of pocket for those additional services. And then they also mentioned that it could be difficult following some aspects of the ethics code, as this setting lacks the typical standards of, BCBAs working in a setting working with kids with autism. And that's just because it's a new setting. So how would we make sure that we're maintaining competence through professional development? What types of assessments would we be conducting, and would these be sufficient for these new behaviors that we're encountering in this new setting? And then what about referrals that are outside of our scope, but other behavior analysts aren't available in this setting to take on those referrals? So what would that look like, that kind of pros and cons of, you might not have that competence, but there is like no other behavioral person working in pediatrics that you can refer to. And again, like these are all really just concerns for us moving into any new area, just making sure that we can maintain, following our ethics code while also being able to bridge this gap into a new area. So, it does have certain struggles to it, but really, behavioral pediatrics, like this could be a very great area for behavior analysts to move in to. It's very effective for parents and pediatricians to utilize this integrated collaboration. And we just may need to be more flexible in our treatment protocols and some of those other barriers that we might face. Now let's move on to the other area that I wanted to talk to you guys about today, which is going to be sports, health, and fitness. So, behavior analysts have actually been working in this area since the 1970s when this started becoming a much hotter topic. ABAI actually has a special interest group for this in health, sports, and fitness if this is something that you're interested in. So, focusing in this area, a lot of the current research out there that they have and a lot of the work that's being done, it really looks at initiating interventions, but less on maintenance. And this is more so when we're talking about health and fitness. And we'll talk about the sports aspect after this. But really, it's how do you get people going? How do you get them motivated to start things? So, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of look at how does this maintain over time, but really that's a problem across the field in health and fitness. I mean, anybody that has started a diet or made a New Year's resolution knows that, it's hard to get going and hard to start, but I mean, how many people are still on a diet that they started 3 years ago? Um, that's where a lot of that difficulty comes in, is that maintenance. So, some behavioral interventions that have been used in research and also in practice for improving health and fitness have been self monitoring, using goal setting and feedback, and then again, adjusting those goals. So, kind of doing that all together, being able to just have that monitoring, make a very specific goal that's measurable, objective, get feedback, and then up the goals as you are moving along and making progress. Again, just as we would with our kids that we're working with. Also, utilization of reinforcement. So that can look like tokens, money, tangibles, utilizing the PREMAC principle or behavioral contracts. Also, using social support to improve some of these behaviors, as well as competition and public posting among each other. And then we also have using gamification to increase the motivation and increase the amount of time that people really spent on these more active activities. So if it's fun and you're making it more like a game, then you can see improvements there. And then also utilizing fitness trackers like Fitbit, and also along with their web-based interventions to utilize that as a way to change behavior. So all of those things are known behavioral interventions that we can use. They all have research backing them, and there is, quite a bit of research out there for this field. I do feel like moving into working with adults or even kids really to change their behaviors to improve health and fitness is one of the more larger subspecialties that we can move into. And I think it was even, some of the bigger companies out there, I think, are taking a look at things that we can do because I think it was even Weight Watchers, and I could be wrong about that, but I think it was Weight Watchers that actually employed a BCBA or someone at least that was working on the behavioral aspect of it to incorporate that in their program. And honestly, you can see even a program like that, so many behavioral changes that really makes these programs more effective. Use of reinforcement and accountability, and the social component to that, having that social support, all of those things, having challenges in there that kind of make it more of a game, utilizing all of these things into big programs, like Fitbit, their premium sites, or Weight Watchers, or whatever the program might be, um, can definitely help bring those programs to being something that is less like a short term diet and more like something that is ideally going to have that maintenance over time and that longevity of people engaging in those programs. So let's go now and talk about sports performance improvement, and some behavioral interventions that we've been using here. And again, some of them are the same as things that we've looked at for the health and fitness aspect as well. And again, in sports, we've been working in that field for a while as well. So some research-based interventions that we have articles on include using behavioral coaching, which is basically behavioral skills training, utilizing video modeling and video feedback for the player's performance, using auditory feedback, whether that's verbal or with a click or anything like that, public posting of performance to encourage change in behaviors, utilizing reinforcement, and that can include money, praise tokens, or negative reinforcement, and then also self-directed approaches for making those changes. Now, also in this area, and this was specifically mentioned on the BACB website, and I think it's kind of interesting when you are looking at, well, what else can we do in this realm? Some other areas that were linked with this subdomain include nutrition coaching, wellness coaching, lifestyle coaching, and personal training. So it's not just, you know, this one small aspect of it or just working in this area. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we can do related to working with typical adults and utilizing reinforcement, utilizing changes to the environment and prompting and shaping these skills over time to make these changes, whether it is to do with specific sports improvement or nutritional changes, which might be just desired, or they could also be medically necessary for somebody with a condition like diabetes, or improving fitness, all of those things. Plus, if you look at these other areas like lifestyle coaching or, personal training, there's many different ways that as behavior analysts we can approach this to make those changes. And at least with this subdomain, I feel like we have more resources out there and more people that we can even just get on Facebook and find somebody that is basically doing this, and get some support or ask questions or anything like that. And as I was going through this, I remembered an article I wrote back in 2017, which is really relevant, and I've actually linked that under our references as well, if that is something that you're interested in looking at. But back in 2017, I was actually working with a BCBA that had created a company utilizing ABA to improve sports performance. So her husband worked as the coordinator of skill development and then later as an assistant field coordinator for a Major League Baseball team. And bringing their individual backgrounds together allowed them to create a coaching system to improve the player's behavior and performance. So I interviewed them to learn more about this approach. And at the time, it was still fairly new of really just bringing in those principles of ABA into the world of sports. And other people have done this before. I mean, like I said, we've been in this field for a while and, have worked with sports and fitness and all of that for several decades now. But again, this was new for this area of kind of bringing this science into sports and how they were going to use that to change players' behavior. And for that starting off piece, it really just meant utilizing actual reinforcement and punishment to change the behaviors of professional baseball players, not just verbal praise because that's what everyone else does, and consequences that didn't actually work to change their behavior. So their company now focuses on individualized skill development plans utilizing ABA. So that can be with, somebody that's professionally doing sports or even at the high school level or younger than that, just having that individualized plan to improve performance. They also work on team building within teams, educating coaches and staff on human behavior and ways to implement procedures based on ABA, and then also parent training for parents of amateur athletes. So you can read a little bit more about this in that article that I wrote. It's on my website and it's titled "On Using ABA to Coach Baseball." And again, I also have that linked below so you can find that as well. So, before we wrap up here, we've talked about a couple of main domains that you can move into. And there's, of course, so many more. Like, I could talk forever about all the different potential areas that we can work in. And again, we will touch on more of those through our newsletters and other content that will be coming out this month. But just some overall tips. So if you're interested in moving into a new field as a BCBA, you really want to start off by learning everything that you can about this field. So seek out shadowing opportunities. Speak to people that are working in the field to understand what it is that they are doing and also to see how your background can contribute to this process. Like, how are you going to utilize your skills in this new field and how are you going to move into that field? We also want to think about how are we going to build our competence in this new area. So all of these, sub areas that we can work in, especially, whether it's listed in that book or in the BACB website, or if you find something completely new, chances are there's not going to be any, or sometimes there'll be some, but not a ton of BCBAs working there. So we want to make sure that we are moving into the field, still following our ethics code, and building our competence before we go out and just start doing it. So we want to get a mentor is going to be a big part of that. And that's okay even if they are not a BCBA, but somebody that's in that field that can help build your competency in that field as well. And that might also include the need to take additional coursework or do additional trainings or receive an additional certification as needed, just depending on what the area is that you're interested in moving into. You also want to have a plan regarding how you're going to get in the door. So are you going to start at the ground level and move up? Are you going to create your own company doing this? What is that plan to enter the field going to look like? Because you might not have the credibility to enter that field, really, even though you have a lot of background as a BCBA. So we really want to plan that. Is that something you're going to be okay with if you just start at the beginning, or are you going to utilize your skills, and is there a way that you can prove your value right now with the skills that you currently have, even though you're moving into this new field? And then also, we don't want to forget that even if your title is not BCBA, as you are moving into new areas, that we are still going to need to follow the ethics code by staying relevant with literature, maintaining our competence, and more. So that can be a barrier in new areas where it's not really clear what the correct answer is regarding the ethics code. But just make sure that you realize it is still there, and we still want to make sure that we are following all of the requirements in our ethics code as well. Thank you for listening to this very first podcast, and I hope to have you tuning in for future episodes as well. For our next episode, I will be talking to Dr. Todd Ward, discussing his recent decision to let his BCBA expire, what he's working on now, and how he is still utilizing the science of behavior and continuing to utilize ABA outside the box in what he is currently doing now. Well, again, thank you guys very much, and I will see you next time. Thanks for joining me today. Remember, if you are interested in getting CEU'S for this podcast, head on over to abcbehaviortx.com and you can purchase podcast CEU'S individually under the Products tab, or become a member of the Behavior Crew and get 2 podcast CEU'S per month for free for all paying members. Be sure to contact me with any questions or suggestions, and I'll see you again next time. Have a great week.